Hello Booktube, and welcome to my first ever mid-year freak out book tag. And I'm freaking out a little bit only because I hope this goes well. I watched a Booktube video that said, I don't know who it was, but it was talking about that every booktuber sooner or later does the mid-year freak out book tag. And I've never done it, and it's going to be my 4th year on Booktube. So I'm a little nervous, but let's get started with the prompts. This mid-year book freakout tag was started by a former booktuber, Chami. That's all I know, but let's get on. Number 1, best book you've read so far this year. I thought I was going to tell you about a book that I just read, and it's coming in another category. But I went back to January, and the best book I read is A Month in the Country by J.L. Carr, and I'll have it over here. This book is amazing. This book gave me all the feels. It's a short book. It's around 135 pages, and it's a simple story. When you look at it, it's a battered and bruised man coming back from World War I. He was a soldier, and he has PTSD. We find this out pretty soon. And he has a job where he goes to this town, I think it's called Oxgodley, to the church there to uncover a mural that's hidden behind whitewash. And this mural is very old and very meaningful, but he gets sort of pushed back by it. But the thing that I loved about it the most, I don't know, there's so much to love about it, but he's up high on a scaffold, looking down, in a sense, at all of the people that come to him, that he's meeting. Some of them have their own issues. Some of them are just interested in him. And in this month, he meets people and he heals. And it's the most beautiful book I think I've ever read. So if you know, I wrote on my Goodreads review a year ago that I wasn't smart enough about architecture, English architecture, or some of the words that were not Americanized. They were British words, and that I needed to read it again, because this is a book you can read again and again and keep on getting stuff out of it, good stuff out of it. So I think I talked about that enough. I wasn't here to give a review, but that was my favorite book of the year. And I have to thank Kelly from Books I'm Not Reading, because she always talks about this book. So thank you, Kelly. Number 2 is best sequel I've read this year. I could talk about a lot of mystery books that I'm not going to, really go into. There's the Nero Wolfe, number 31, Champagne for One. There's the Inspector Wexford, number 8, Some Lie and Some Die. That was really good because it had like a hippie vibe to it, and a Woodstock-like festival that was really good. And, it's always a well-written when you read one of those Inspector Wexford books. But I have to say that my best sequel this year was the Manawaka series by Margaret Lawrence. And I'm reading this as a buddy read with Lindy from Lindy's Magpie Reads, and Sarah from Roadworthy, Sarah Wallace. And I read 2 other books, Jest of God and A Bird in the House, and they were both wonderful. They both take place in the fictional town of Manawaka, which is in Manitoba, Canada. And I'm new to Canadian literature, and I just love this book in particular, but all of her books are very complex yet interesting. And this book is basically about a woman who was brought up, it's sort of autobiographical, brought up in this very harsh way, and it goes through her life and the difficulties, and I hope the happiness that she gets to at the end. But the writing is exquisite. The way it's a poem. The book is a poem. And it's also very ahead of its time. And I love all of Margaret Lauren's books. They were all made into films, I think. But anyway, that's my favorite sequel. And I don't read many sequels. I guess fantasy is more in sequels, and I don't read fantasy. But there are some literary fiction and mysteries that are sequels. So anyway, that's my answer to that. Now, the 3 is the new release you haven't read yet but want to. And I found this on another channel, Priscilla, one of my favorite booktubers and evening reader. I call myself the night reader, but she took evening reader from me. I'm just kidding. But she had on her last video, I think, The God of the Woods. And I listened to a little excerpt of The God of the Woods, and I said, this is for me. It's a literary fiction, it's mystery, and it sounds wonderful, but my library doesn't have it, so I'm gonna have to wait, because I looked everywhere, and yeah, I can't afford to spend $30 on a book. So yeah, but definitely thank you, Priscilla, because I want to read that. Now, for the number 4, most anticipated release of the second half of the year. I don't read new releases very often, very, very seldom, but when I go on vacation, that's when I buy new books. That's when I spoil myself. But in this case, I found this on a website called LitHub, and this book is called Carrie, Carolyn, Coco by Sarah Gerard. My Friend, Her Murder, and an Obsession with the Unthinkable. And just to let you know, if you go on Goodreads now, right now, for the next 2 days or so, they're having a giveaway. And this book might seem like a true crime fiction memoir, but it's much more than that from what I'm reading. Now, from what I did some research on it, and what it said, Carrie, Carolyn, Coco is simultaneously an investigation of a murder, a tribute to the victim's life, and an expose of the legal and educational systems designed to protect wealthy white men from their own actions. So this has a lot. This is memoir, this is social commentary, and true crime. And everything about all of these things is up my alley. So I hope I win, but if I don't win, I'm looking for it at my library as soon as they get it, or if I can't wait, I am going to buy it. I will find a way to get it. Number 5, the biggest disappointment this year. I won't go into that too much, but I have to say it's my first reading of Muriel Spark. I liked her first book, A Far Cry from Kensington. A Far Cry from Kensington, say that 3 times. And to a lesser extent, The Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. I think I might like the movie better. But everything else, it was either from bad to worse. And the worst one, and I'm not even going to show it, is called The Driver's Seat. And it was awful, really terrible. I hated it, hated it, hated it. Okay, I think I said enough about that. The biggest surprise of the year, and I'll try to have a copy here. I talked about it already, so I won't go into it too much. It's Fight Night by Miriam Toews. I hope I'm saying her name right, or Toews. And she's a Mennonite, or she was former Mennonite. She's also a Canadian writer. And this book was interesting. It's also kind of absurdist, but in a better way than Muriel Spark's books are. It's told in the voice of like a 10-year-old girl who lives with her grandmother, and her grandmother is weird in a wonderful way. in her 70s, but she's not doing too well health-wise. And her mother is pregnant, and there's a lot of sadness in this book. And I'm told that this author writes a lot of sadness mixed with absurdity and comic. And it's really true. I enjoyed this book a lot. And if you like this book, let me know in the comments, because I usually don't like books written with a young protagonist, and yet I have a lot of books this year that have young protagonists that I've loved. So never say never. But it was done very well. I think that the voice of the 10-year-old, she's writing to her father, who's absent, telling him what's going on in the house. Like, it's a long letter, basically. But it's good. It's really good. Okay, so that was my biggest surprise this year, but there was other surprises. 8, newest fictional crush. I don't have a fictional crush, but I get author crushes, and I'm going to get into that a little later. Number 9 is newest favorite character, and I looked for this book. I have it, but I couldn't find it at the moment. And it was a book that won, that was a finalist for I'm trying to think, the Goldsmith Prize, and it's called Like a Mule Bringing Ice Cream to the Sun by Sarah Ladipo Manquita. And I'll have a copy here, even though I have it, so that I couldn't find it. So who is the favorite character? Her name is Mariah de Silva. She's a 75-year-old Nigerian-born woman, living in San Francisco, and she's wonderful. This is a novella. It could have been longer, a lot of people say, but the character herself is so real. She's an English professor, former English professor. She has a lot of friends. She wears a lot of outfits in her native dress so she can get attention from guys. She's sexy. And then she has a fall, and things kind of, she goes on vacation, she drives, and then, she has a fall, and what happens after that, how her life changes. And it really made me think, being almost 75 and being independent, and then having something happen like a fall, and that kind of messes up your whole life, or does it? So she's my favorite character. I loved her. I wished I could meet her. One thing that I liked about her is that she loves San Francisco. She doesn't want to go back to Nigeria, though some of her friends have gone back. She doesn't want to live anywhere else because she says that the gay guys give her a lot of attention, and they always notice her, and they talk to her, and they notice her new outfits. And actually, that happened to me in San Francisco. So I was just walking down the street on my first visit to San Francisco, and a guy started talking to me. I don't know if he was trans or not, but we had a lovely conversation, and yeah, I love that too. So I think I'm a lot like this character. So I would say get that book. It's a small press book, and it's really worth it. Okay, the next one. So Mariah de Silva, great character. 10 books that made me cry. Now, last year I talked about Foster made me cry. I mean, at the end of Foster, it was so unexpected that I just burst into tears. And this year I'm not having that experience so much, but I did cry at the first book that I said, my favorite book of the year, A Month in the Country. And I did tear up at the end of that book as well. But I don't think I'm reading too many books that would make me cry, because I don't want to cry too much. But those, in a good way, I'd like to cry. So, yeah, let me know if any book has made you cry lately. Let me know in the comments. Okay, so what is the next prompt? Books that made you happy. Oh, I have a lot of books that made me happy. And some of them are coming from a different category. But a book that made me happy in a lot of ways is this book that was gifted to me, and that made me happy, from a very special subscriber, and that always makes me happy. But the book is Happiness, and it's by Rabbi Zelik Pliskin. Formulas, story, and insights. Just little bunches of wonderfulness. And I talked about wish people joy and master the skill of happiness and start your day the right way. Just little bundles of goodness and happiness. So that's my book that made me happy. So now we're on 12. Most beautiful book you've bought or received so far this year. Now this is a library book, and it's beautiful. It's beautiful because it's an art book. At its heart, it's an art book, and it's called Nilda. And I showed it to you, but I didn't express how beautiful the art is in this book. It's by Nicolasa Moore, a New Yorican like me, which means a Puerto Rican born in New York, and she was an artist. And I think the cover is gorgeous. I thought it was so gorgeous that I went and bought a copy of my own. This is a library book, but there was no photos in this copy, so I have to buy another copy of the hardcover. And what I learned about Nicolasa Moore is, well, so much. And she's also, I'm obsessed with her as an author, because not only is she a New Yorican, and the book Nilda, which was written in the voice of a young girl, 10 years old until she gets to be 15 or 16, is an artist. And in real life, Nicolasa Moore was an artist. And why she got into writing books is that her art has a lot of almost like graffiti in it. And her art director told her, you have a lot of words in your art. Why don't you write a book? And she did. And I love this book so much. Nilda is a book that I can read over and over, so I'm glad I have even the words to it, but I want to get the hardcover, because the book is about a young girl in the 40s. Now, even my father came to New York later than that. He came in the late 40s, and this is like the early 40s. So I was so excited to read about what my father might have felt living in New York, moving from Puerto Rico to New York in the 50s. But what really, beside the beautiful, there's not a lot of art in here, but enough to make me really enjoy it. But what I really loved about this book, that even though it was written in the 70s, about the 40s, I related to almost everything that they were talking about, either experiences that I experienced myself, or that my friends have experienced, because I was brought up in a Puerto Rican neighborhood. So, and I'm going to try to get one more photo, art. And here's one. She goes to camp, and I went to camp. When you were in New York in the 50s, and in the 40s, she went to camp, and it made a big difference in her life. And here she has Bard Manor, Camp for Youth. And this is another one of her beautiful artwork. Now, when I said I have a fictional crush, I went and looked up. She had a memoir, Nicolas Amour, and I read it online. It's only 100 pages. But to say that this is not autobiographical, everything that happened, not everything, but everything that happened in this book happened in her life, plus more stuff that she didn't talk about. But I recommend that everyone read Nilda. It's one of my favorites of the year. Okay, so now a book, most beautiful book you've received. I said that already. And a book that made me happy. That made me happy. But another book that made me happy is Point Zero by Seicho Matsumoto, who's my favorite author. I don't know if I missed that. Who's your favorite new author? Yeah, it's my favorite new author, and it's the book that made me the most happy. Now, Point Zero, like I said, is written by Seicho Matsumoto. He's a Japanese, he was a Japanese, well, I have a picture of him in another book, but why did I like it? It says here that his thrillers dissect Japanese society, and it's so true. I lived in Japan for 3 years, and this brought back so many memories, not only of the place, and he writes about different places in Japan, but of the language. For example, when people came in, it's translated as, "You're home, welcome." And that is, and I thought of the Japanese saying, "Tadaima." When anybody comes in, they say, "I'm home, you're home." And then they said, then the other person says, "Okaniri Mansai," yes, you're home, or something like that. But I kept on translating these words, and like, he would be honorific Matsumoto-san, and I kept on doing that, translating words. So what is it about? Basically, this is 1958, post-war Japan, and Teiko, and she's a female protagonist, which I loved, and she marries Kenichi Uhara, 10 years her senior, by a matchmaker, and after a 4-day honeymoon, Kenichi vanishes, and she decides to go look for him. And it was surprising, it was interesting, and it made me very happy. And I'm going to read it again. And it's not available anywhere. So I got, this is a new release that no one has. Well, no one in the US anyway. I found it on Goodreads in French. So I recommend this book. When it becomes available, or you want to spend the money, I did. I went to Upstart and Crow in Canada when I was visiting Lindy, and the bookstore seller, she said, "You're not going to find this in Hawaii," and she was right. And I loved it, and I'm going to read everything he wrote. So he's my favorite new author. It's a mystery. And I like that it's a mystery and not so much of a thriller, though it has thrillery aspects to it. And the last question is 13. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? Now, I don't need to read any book by the end of the year, but when I was looking at my TBR, just my shelves in general, I said, why am I buying books? I have so many books that I haven't read yet. Plus all these books that I want to read, and some of them are library books, so I have to read them first. So I'm going to go over the books that I want to read soon. A book that I'm reading right now is by that same author, and this is Inspector Imanishi Investigates, also by Seicho Matsumoto, and this is translated by Beth Carey, winner of the Akusagawa Literary Prize and the Mystery Writers of Japan Prize. And isn't this a wonderful picture with a cigarette in his mouth? And he lived to 85, so I'm not saying you should smoke, but I love this picture so much. And basically, it's the same thing in that I found so much that was so relevant to my stay in Japan. And in the railway, I'm going to just tell you a little bit about it. In the railway yard of Tokyo's Kamata Station, a disfigured corpse is found, and it's grisly. It's in the tracks, and typically Japanese, Imanishi Aitaro, so his last name is Imanishi. He takes his work not only seriously but personally, even more so when the victim turns out, I'm not going to say that because I think it's spoilery. I don't know why. I didn't even get to that part yet. Oh, why did I do that? Okay. Anyway, it's wonderful. It talks about real places that my daughter, who lives with me, lived 7 years in Japan, speaks fluent Japanese, and she said, oh, they talked about Iwate Prefecture, and I lived there. So if you want to know what it was like in the 50s to live in Japan, to be Japanese, well, you'll never know that, but it'll give you a glimpse. You'll be transported, I promise you. Okay, so what else do I want to read? Another middle grade, I don't even think this is middle grade, it was a picture book by Nicolas Amor, because she wrote picture books too. And this is Felita. And she didn't, I don't think she did the pictures by Ray Cruz. And basically the story is about Felita, who has to move from her neighborhood. And her neighborhood is very familiar to her, and she doesn't want to move. In fact, the first chapter is the last day. So here's a picture of her neighborhood, and I'm looking forward to reading this. And I have to bring this back to the library, so I have to read it sooner than later. This is a book I got in Canada, Comfort Me with Apples, More Adventures at the Table by Ruth Reichel. Bluebird by Attica Locke. I've been wanting to read this book for a long time. It's one of the best mysteries of the year, they said. I want to finish reading Mr. Flood's Last Resort by Jess Kidd. Kim of Middle of the Book March and I were doing Mental Health May, and she just finished this book, and she loves Jess Kidd, and I started it, but then I let it go, and I'm going to read it again as soon as my library books are over. And a new release, which I should have mentioned, but I put it down because it just wasn't the right time for me to read it. The Postcard by Anne Barrest, a brand new book, and I think it's a 2024 new release. That's yeah, it was written in 2023, this edition 2024. So basically it's about an investigation into family trauma of mothers and daughters, and a vivid portrait of 20th century Parisian intellectual and artistic life, but it has a mystery in it, and that's what kind of made me want to buy it. Brand new. I think that's all I have for you right now. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I'd love to hear from you. And please press the notification bell. It would help me out a lot. So thank you so much for this rambling best, worst, honorable mentions of the mid-year book freakout tag. The only thing that made me freak out was getting through this video. But I don't care about how many books I read a year. If I read another 50 by the end of the year, I hope I get at least 1 or 2 books as good as the books that I've showed to you today. And not too many duds like the ones I showed you today. So until we meet again, have a wonderful week, and I'll be back very soon with another video. Thanks everybody, and aloha.